Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. And you're with me and Walter again. And one of our guests has arrived on time. The other one, we're waiting to run in. So, Walter, I'll let you introduce your own.
Good morning. Indeed, happy Friday. I'm standing up for today's episode, which means that my microphone is a little bit further away, so I hope that the audio is clear. We have with us today, we have Jeroen. I have been working with Jeroen at a customer side for the last, 4 years, 3 years, something like that. And sincerely enjoyed it. Jeroen is one of the best managers I've seen in my entire 20-year career. Don't let him hear that, but it's true. And really enjoyed working with him and just chatting about things.
Oh, stop it, you two. Stop it.
Thanks, Walter. The crate of beer is in the delivery.
Yes.
Great to have your own. And I wish I knew you more so that I could be like, yes, to all of that.
It's great to be here.
Awesome. Our first topic is one that I haven't been scared of security problems for a while, but when I read this one, I got significantly worried. It's a relatively new type of attack called dependency confusion, and basically what it boils down to is the programming languages that work with packages, like for instance Python, or more clearly even NPM. When you maintain a list of packages that are with your project, and some are public and some are private, it turns out that if you can, that usually the public repositories that packages are sourced from are sourced first before looking at the private ones. And if you know what the private packages are that a company's environment is looking at, you can actually get those, you can publish those packages to a public repository and just have them pull those in without anyone noticing, really. And the article that hopefully Lina can link in the comments is one that outlines this attack and did it successfully with a number of different companies. And the really quite big danger there is how superficially community-sourced packages have started being a totally normal thing in enterprise software. So, Jeroen, you had some very good things to say about this yesterday.
Yeah, I think the attack is interesting. It's also somewhat obvious, right? It's not hard to think this up once you know these kind of technologies and once you've used them yourself and seen others use them. To some degree, I think the mitigations are obvious as well, right? If you have more explicit declarations, that would help. If you get more obscure about your nomenclature, it's going to protect you to some degree, although it's not perfect. And then, of course, there are products that will help you, make sure you have approved repositories rather than public ones. You have a middle ground clearinghouse for your repositories and things like that. And no doubt companies will come up with services for this as well. Now that these kind of bits of news are coming out, I mean, this must be a business model for somebody. So the particular problem, I think, can be mitigated with some relatively simple measures, probably somewhat easily. I wonder if it's going to make people's priority lists, given everything else that you have to worry about a lot of times. But I think the most interesting thing is the way we've come to depend and trust communities in software, and the way that has extended into enterprise software, possibly in a way that we would not contemplate doing on other aspects of our lives, right? My government makes me and my family be very careful about what we put in our medicine cabinet. And yes, obviously, a lot of medicines could be made cheaper, faster, more easily by other people, but they haven't gone through the scrutiny and the governance, and therefore they don't end up in my medicine cabinet. Similarly, with cars, car parts, there's a lot of aspects in life which are highly governed and which we as society have decided we want governed. And in the case of software, maybe that's not the case yet.
I mean,
I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that we saw it recently with electrical bikes come to mind. When electrical bikes first became a thing, everything that could move was allowed on the road, and then they said, maybe going 40 kilometers an hour on a bike isn't necessarily a safe idea if you're not wearing a helmet, and this thing is not classified as a motorized vehicle instead of the same thing as a moped. So I think that's absolutely true. The question is then, of course, developers generally want to move fast, and half the time I think these issues are not very glaringly obvious. So it boils back down to getting everyone in the software development lifecycle to think about security as a basic requirement, and not say, "Oh, that's fine. We'll source the community packages now, and we'll deal with the how to say that, with making a private repository later," because that's usually how it ends up happening.
There's a go-to saying by some famous American football coach, which is "Be quick, but don't hurry." Right? And I think
that's very smart.
A lot of us have gotten into the habit of hurrying. We're being told to hurry by management. We're being told to hurry by consultants who will not be around when the shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
I think examples like this, also the famous example now of the monitoring tool that got hit. These kind of examples, SolarWinds, it's going to make people think, and it's going to make them wonder whether they're being quick or whether they're hurrying, and if the risk is worth it.
I speak to guys in my team quite a lot about this specific aspect. They're like, "Oh, we're being asked to cut corners." I'm like, "Don't tell anyone that a corner can be cut. Just tell them it cannot be cut because there's a building on the corner. So then it will be easier for everyone, because in the end, as a consultant, you're being judged not on how fast you deliver the work, but on how well it performs after you've delivered it and left. If the whole thing falls apart 2 weeks after you're finished with your project, that's going to reflect badly on your reputation. Whereas if you finish a week earlier or a week later, nobody's going to actually mind that much."
I don't agree, Walter. As someone who's
good,
spent their entire career supporting something that someone else built, normally it doesn't fall apart 2 weeks later. Normally it waits a good couple of months while it's well settled into support or managed services or whatever you want to call it, and then somehow it's the managed services team's fault that it fell apart because they weren't taking good care of it. Yeah. So normally the consultant is already working on the next project and being applauded. Wow, such a fast delivery, man! This was awesome. The feedback doesn't reach him in any way, or the customer.
And this is Sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Sorry, Lina, you're absolutely right. And so it hits the reputation of the consultant without ever going back to them. So you think you did a great job, while in the customer or in the managed services part, people are saying, "Oh my God, that guy did such a horrible job. All of his stuff fell apart." And we've seen this in the past at All in Data with engineers that delivered really well. Customers were super happy, and then a year later, you talk to a customer, and they're like, "Yeah, actually, we had to pull that stuff out of production because it was delivered really well, really fast. But it turns out that the problem was a bit more complicated." It's a really difficult thing to solve.
Yeah, and I think the interesting aspect is the whole dynamics of communities. I think you guys spoke some episodes ago about CentOS and Red Hat, right? So there you see a tension between business and community. And you have users of communities, and now there is an interesting other new dimension of people who actually want to do harm. I do fundamentally believe, in nature, communities are good, they're great. But if companies get involved and become dependent on the community, there's an ulterior motive. And then if your community is successful and your stuff gets used, then all of a sudden you are now a target for people that don't want to be part of the community, that in fact want to do harm. And communities will have to think about how to deal with that, how to reconcile that, and whether they're going to publicly proclaim that we're a free-for-all community, or whether they will self-regulate somehow to guarantee some level of accountability and reliability, or whether they're going to leave that up to the market to create something parallel, which is not quite as open as a community, but enterprise-focused. And at the end of the day, there'll be somebody to blame. There'll be a neck to choke, somebody to charge if things go wrong.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even community contributors seeking to do actual active harm. They're just seeking to not be a good community player, and that's when you get OpenStack, basically. Lots of community, let's do it all together, and then big companies that said, oh, you know what, we'll just make an OpenStack distribution that isn't compatible with anyone else's OpenStack distribution, so we have nicely locked in our customers. Wait, hold up. Our next topic is quite interesting read, an article from the New York Times. I'll post it in the comments. Article from the New York Times where that talks about how Andy Jassy was very funny term, a brain double for Jeff Bezos. Because very simply put, Andy has been working together with Jeff for the last 20 plus years, and that means that he knows very well what Jeff is thinking and what his ideas were. So it'll be very interesting to see now how they will work. When Jeff is no longer at the steering wheel, because as much as they've been working together, I am sure that Andy also has his own ideas on what should be happening next, or what are the key points that they should be doing. Good morning, Tom. Sorry we already got started, but we're happy that you managed to make it.
Sorry,
can you hear
guys.
Us? Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I can hear you. You're not
We
coming
can
through
hear
my
you too.
microphone though for some reason. Okay, that's fine.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
All good. So we're talking about the Jeff Bezos Andy Jassy article from the New York Times, and for me, it's quite interesting, this brain double idea.
I don't buy it though. I don't believe that how matter long you've been exposed to someone's influence and ideas. I think when they move away, if they move away, you find this as an opportunity to express yourself and your ideas. So I don't think that this could be 100%.
No. It's like forking an open source project, right? So at some point you fork, and in the beginning everything will be the same as the project you forked from, and the more time progresses, the more divergent you will be from what would happen if you followed the other path. That's kind of
honestly, I think you have to have worked in a really big enterprise to understand and appreciate how much of an autonomous organisms these things are, and how little influence any individual wields on them, even the CIO, the CTO, the CEO, whatever. Right. So definitely enterprises have succession planning down to an art. Right. Andy Jassy didn't come up by accident. It was well planned. It was well groomed. It was executed. In fact, it was practiced, I believe, because Jeff stepped out, looking at pet projects, and came back only when COVID hit. So it's actually something they've done before. And I'm very convinced that coming from the web services space, certainly Jeff's not going to change, and he's not going to change anything there. And the direction of the company is well set. And I also suspect that even somebody like Jeff doesn't have as much influence on the culture, the direction of the overall current company as people give him credit for. I mean, even the CIO or CTO, they will do and think about 5 things, maybe 7, 8 things a day in what the company does out of the tens or hundreds of thousands of things that are going on. For some reason, we like to think of these figureheads of companies and countries and movements and clubs, and whereas typically the team and the tactics are much more important.
Do you think that, Jeroen? Do you think in AWS that's the or Amazon that's the case with Jeff Bezos? Do you think that I do think that leadership in all of those big companies is really, really important, and I think that I would say you're right of probably all of the development, all of the technical stuff, the direction, and all of the they've got so many brains in that business that it's not funny. But I think that from the I guess the strategic sort of leadership, the board, I would still say that's he would still sort of wield a fair amount of power. And I was just going to suggest that perhaps even as he's no longer there, as to whether or not he still has an influence over the board.
He takes up a leading board seat, right? So he'll still definitely be there.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be on Andy's quick dial, so to speak, for things. But one of the things I was wondering about is if you look at the reputation and the company dynamics of Amazon versus Amazon Web Services, there is a radical difference. AWS is well known for treating its people extremely well, and Amazon is in the news every other day for treating its people extremely not well. So I'm wondering how if that will have any effect. But as I think I'm half on Tom and half on Jeroen's board, where he doesn't have that much influence, but at the same time he is the one setting the strategy. So regardless of Amazon,
I guess it's how you define leadership. What I've seen high executives do is be the tiebreaker in difficult situations, deciding on ideas that were typically not their own. I've seen them be relationship makers, managing important relationships with other customers. Which is super important, needs to get done, and it helps if it gets done by a figurehead. But I think the real leadership that brings out ideas, that really changes course and that moves things forward, doesn't come out of any individual in any company. It comes out of teams and groups of people working together and refining ideas and bouncing them off. And in that sense, I'd be surprised if this change of players is going to make a radical difference for these companies.
Yeah, we'll see. I guess time will tell. Moving on to the next topic, because we're already 20 minutes underway. These things always go faster than I'd imagine. The next topic is a topic about data breach notification standards, which is a mouthful, but it's actually quite important. So in a nutshell, the European Union set, of course, the GDPR requirements, but didn't really specify how and when and where you should notify people if you do have a breach. And now the European Data Protection Board, I didn't even know they existed until I read the article, but this is apparently an organization, actually went much further and laid out example notification guidelines. And I think that's hopefully going to be something that can be incorporated into policy, so that we can get a little bit better about this whole breach notification stuff. Ideally, in my opinion, it should become something like CVE. Like CVE has a really well-polished standard for publishing these kind of things. Except that, I don't know. Well, it's something that's in development as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, I think it's some of the issues. I mean, I've been part of some really interesting conferences that we'd run in the past and what have you, and just when you get all the way down the layers of the business, companies with over 250 people, I think, are supposed to have a person responsible for data, and the part of the issues is just probably much the same as all we're talking at the moment about these COVID rules and all the rest of it. It's just really a lack of doubt when it really comes to it. The people that are actually responsible for the detection and the responsibilities around this, and then the breaches that come in, what is a GDPR breach, what is not, and then so the layer of the business that where the breaches occur, there's a sort of a lack of knowledge, and then possibly the lawyers get involved, and then there is that they can also technically and legally delay things, and I think that in general, I think there's just a lack of real clarity and understanding across this whole piece, and I definitely know companies that know that they have had breaches without a shadow of a doubt, and are almost prepared to have a come back and let the people
I've seen it.
buy them. Yes, exactly, and just wait for the fine if they are the ones unlucky enough to get caught. And there's a sort of a sense that the big guy, the really sort of from getting money in, if you like, if this is a collecting revenue type thing, it will start with the big guys at the very, very top, and will slowly but surely filter down the food chain to some of the others. So the ones kind of at the SME and SMB market, or sort of small medium enterprises, or even medium enterprises, are kind of are not really, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I mean, they don't find it in their own best interest to be public with these things, and I think the only way that can be forced is if there's heavy regulation on it, so that you know that if you're getting caught, you're in for big trouble instead of a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes companies not do that. I used to have a domain, walterheck.com, and the catch-all email address for it was my main email address. And so I could make, if I would sign up for, let's say, YouTube, I would make an email address, youtube@walterheck.com. So it was named after the service and not used anywhere else. And then I would get look at my spam, and I would get spam on that specific email address. So I knew 100% sure that my data had been leaked. And I'd contact the company and say, hey, I'm receiving spam on an address that is only ever uniquely used in your company. And they would just straight up deny it. They're like, no, we're not, we haven't been breached. Like, I am 100% sure you have been.
I had the same in the US when Comcast misspelled my name. It was super clear who they ended up with.
Yep.
Yeah.
But there's also the extent of the breach, isn't it? If it's something like sending an email to all of your customers in the to field where they can see each other's email addresses, that's one thing. But if you leak data for someone's bill or some much more private data, it's another thing. So that's going to be really interesting. Where do you start reporting, and where are you like, human error?
Yeah,
and I think that's what this draft paper is trying to address. As an IT manager, for me, security is something I deal with every day, but not something I really spend time on every day. And whenever it hits as a problem, it's a distraction. And once it hits, it's very hard to get clarity on exactly what we need to do now to get out of this. And this paper being presented as a cookbook is one of the first things I've seen that actually gives some practical guidelines, not only to tell your team what to go and do, but also to go and tell your internal audit people, risk people, security people that whatever they're proposing is way over the top, not needed, and not what we need to be focusing on right now. This cookbook kind of approach is really useful to me. Clearly, it's not perfect yet. There's a lot more recipes that can be added to this cookbook, but the whole notion of spelling out the main types and then showing kind of the stages of severity and the practical responses is super useful to me. It's one of the first practical things I've seen in this realm.
But Jeroen, would you say that I think a lot of this starts purely with culture. So many things are driven by culture within a business. Now, if some boards are really on top of the security thing, and others are still a long way away from it, and unless that culture is led all the way through the foundations of the business, and it's kind of a security first thing, the boards know that there are, unless they've adequately set aside money for fines and all those types of things, then there will be a resistance from from possibly the top of the business because they don't understand it, and then who are protected by lawyers. And I think that culture is such an important thing within an organisation when talking about security. And those that are doing the best are those that have got that culture at the sort of centre part of their business. And sadly, that's very. I think that's probably a lot fewer than we possibly like to think, and that people will hide behind lawyers for a longer period of time than we think on all of these things.
The larger the organization gets, the more true that is. I think that what you're saying is very true, that it's very much a company culture on how you deal with security and how you deal with inadequate security. I think the difficulty is that very often you find, especially in the consulting world, you find yourself in organizations where you don't have that cloud to change that culture. So you have to kind of deal with whatever the situation is. And I've dealt with more than one customer in my life that didn't have this stuff together. And then you kind of have to point at, hey, this thing that we're doing over here is really not okay. And they're like, yeah, we know, but whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I know a CISO at a very large insurance company, very, very large insurance company, who basically left his post at that company because he said my time at the board meeting, which was once a quarter, was cut from 5 minutes to almost seconds, and my report that was provided to the CIO was cut down and turned into sort of the mush that the CIO wanted to present. And it was just, he said, and then I've got all the responsibility. I'm the one who's sort of carrying the can for this stuff, and so I'm just not having it, and I'm going. When I got notified of him leaving his post, I was, where are you going? What's happening? And that was what he said to me. He said he can't accept it any longer. And that's also a part of an issue of where you have structure, where you have the security people reporting directly through IT. Because IT are a lot of the controls. They should be there to provide controls. The security people should be reporting into compliance or risk or some other function that allows the policies to be business-driven policies and the IT to be the controls part of the organisation. And that is also a failing in many organisations who are desperately trying to get stuff like this right. But yeah.
We have 2 minutes left, and I had one more topic. We can touch on it really quickly. It very nicely ties into the current one. There's a report that basically said a quarter of government agencies in the US have dealt with data breaches. And in 2020, I added it to the list because I think that it's very clear that this is not just a US government thing, but I think that a lot of companies aren't even aware that they're leaking data. And as Lina said, what is a cloud leak? Putting in customers in a CC field instead of a BCC field can be classified as leakage, but it's not half as bad as in the Netherlands. We had GGD is the Dutch health organization that's dealing with COVID. They got some serious breaches, and they leaked patient health records, which is a hell of a lot worse than someone having my email address.
Yeah, in Bulgaria, a couple of years ago, we had the National Income Agency, Revenue Agency, or whatever it's called in English, leak. And it was an archive of several years' worth of people's data, like social security numbers, how much they're getting as a salary, everyone's names and addresses. It was horrible, and you could see that on the Bulgarian torrent trackers. You could download the archive and check, have I been leaked or not?
And more important, has my neighbor been leaked?
Yes, there was a joke at the time where a Bulgarian meets a Chinese person, and they get introduced, and the Chinese person says, how many Bulgarians are there? And he's like, 7 million in our country. Oh, so you like know everyone's name because you're such a small country. And the Bulgarian said, we not only know each other's names, we know each other's incomes and addresses and ID numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, rather more scary on a similar note. I know that there was a report about it was a sort of a fringe agency, something to do with agriculture or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly the name of the agency that was part of the SolarWinds breach, and no one really took probably too much notice upon it, apart from the fact that they processed all of the various agencies' payrolls. They were the organisation who were responsible for the payrolls of every single agent in the US system. And so it was just I think it was something to do with agricultural agency or something like that. But they just happened to be the payroll, and they're one of the ones that have been breached in the whole system. And then that was disclosed, I think last week. I think I read something on that. So yeah, it's the sort of and sometimes a lot of these things, there can be unintended consequences of the fact that sometimes these hackers don't know exactly what they're after until they get and have a good look around these businesses, and yeah, it's frightening, and I don't think any agency, everyone thinks that these places should be a lot more secure than anywhere else, but at the very nub of all of this stuff is you have humans, and unfortunately humans are fallible, very fallible.
Yeah.
And
it's an unfair battle, right? Because security, you can do everything right and one small thing wrong and still be a victim. And I think that's one of the really tricky aspects of security.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to win.
I think just finishing on with one statistic. I think that there was a thing that NCSC published a year or so ago that 73. They did a review of all of the incidents that happened in the previous year, and I think 73% of all of those incidents could have been helped if with two things. If people had patched their vulnerable systems, that's one, and did a lot more training with their staff, that's two, and 73% of all issues that they had were as a result of those two things. And I think so getting back to basics and training your staff is kind of the message that they were putting out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead. Last minute.
Last comment. It's an observation. I think the training of the staff is really interesting given the trend that I'm seeing. And the article didn't spell out what cloud meant, right? Whether it was platform as a service, software as a service. But what I'm seeing quite a lot is that in SaaS platforms that are getting promoted, especially when they're called no-code or low-code, the staff that's doing your developing is actually shifting away from the people that used to be software professionals to people that are more business experts, software enthusiasts, if you will. And SaaS platforms are being created under the guidance of salespeople and consultants who are very good at showing how quickly you can get results and are less focused on validation and security and things like that.
Operational excellence.
Operational excellence, and that makes me cringe sometimes when I know what some companies put out there on SaaS platforms. And how public those are, how accessible those are, and how easy it is to just get on there for a lark and play around, and all of a sudden you've got a bunch of data on your hands. It's an interesting.
The most challenging environments are the scale-up environments, the hyperscale startups. We see their infrastructure, and it literally makes you want to gouge your eyeballs out. They've so focused on scale that everything else falls by the wayside. And I won't name any names, but I've seen an environment where there were 1,000 EC2 instances in a singular AWS account. And they didn't know which ones were running production. So we said, hey, you need to clean this stuff up because it's dev, test, staging, everything combined. They're like, yeah, we know, but nothing's tagged or named. So we don't really know which one of these 1,000 is actually keeping our production environment alive. Awesome. That's, we're just...
Let me just go get my coffee, and then you run out the door and never come back.
Yeah. Anyway, we're well over time. Thank you, Tom and Jeroen, for joining us. It was a good conversation as every week. Thank you, Lina, for guiding us again, and we hope to see you next week.
And remember, be quick, but don't hurry.
I really like it.
Yeah.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.